session. This will be mainly, we'll have two talks on module placement. First speaker is Frank DiMaio from Seattle. He does not need an introduction because earlier speakers talked about him already. He's going to talk about Rosetta mainly.
Thank you. Hear me okay? All right, so I'm Frank DiMaio. I'm in David Baker's group at the University of Washington, and I'm going to talk about the use of Rosetta structure prediction methodology for problems in X-ray crystallography. I'm talking a bit about molecular replacement and low resolution crystallographic. So I'm going to begin by introducing the Rosetta structure prediction methodology, and then I'm going to talk about each of these two applications. And so Rosetta is a comprehensive software suite for protein structure modeling. It includes software for ab initio folding, for comparative modeling, for protein-protein docking, protein-ligand docking, as well as protein design. And it's been successfully used in previous line prediction, these task line prediction competitions. And the one thing that ties all these different protocols together in Rosetta are these two key components. The first is a pairwise energy function that says, given some amino acid sequence, what's the probability that we'll observe a particular conformation of that sequence. And so then given that energy function, the other key component is ways of exploring this conformational space using knowledge-based exploration. Okay, so Rosetta's an energy function. Like I said, it's this pairwise energy function. Given some conformation, you want to determine the probability that they could observe that particular conformation. And so I think the best way to think about it, so this consists of a number of different energy terms. And I think the best way to think about it is that these energy terms are all statistical terms, but they all have a physical basis. So they include things like the Raman-Condren potential, the probability of observing a particular backward torsion pin, the Dunbar potential, the associated rotor probabilities. You have the van der Waals forces, explicit solvation. Again, hydrogen bonding geometry, the bond length, the hydrogen bond length, the hydrogen bond angle is part of this energy term. There's also just generic residue-residue pairwise distance distributions. And so in addition to sort of several degrees, the energy function has several different degrees of granularity. That the function I just talked about, this high resolution full atom energy, requires that all the atoms, including hydrogens in the protein, are modeled, and it's fairly slow to compute, and however you can minimize against it, and it also offers pretty good discrimination between models. But also Rosetta makes use of a low resolution energy, also known as the centroid energy. Here we model the protein side changes just using a single interaction setup. This is really fast to compute. You can't minimize against it, and it offers, I'm going to say poor discrimination, but basically it's meant to sort of distinguish between different topologies. Okay, so then given these energy functions, Rosetta also has ways of exploring conformational space. And there's actually several different ways that this is done in Rosetta. The two most common I'm going to illustrate on this slide. So the first of these is backbone conformational sampling. And this makes use of something known as fragment insertions. So basically, given the sequence, the amino acid sequence of a protein, we can look at some local windows in that sequence. And we can find in the PDB sort of different conformations of these local windows of sequence. And so like I've shown, for example, here, in this column, you can see that this window of sequence, we look up at all the conformations taken by similar stretches of sequence in the PDB, you can see here. And so the basic idea of a fragment insertion is that you steal these backbone portions from these fragments and insert them into your current. And then the other way, common way that conformational space is explored is through this combinatorial rotor optimization, also known as packing. Basically optimizing the rotors at each side chain position. All right, so given these moves and given these score functions, Rosetta explores this conformational space using a Monte Carlo search. And I've kind of illustrated that on the bottom here of this slide. But so basically, the moves consist of either a backbone fragment insertion or a repack. So you're starting at some local minimum in the energy landscape. You do this move, either a fragment insertion or a repack, to sort of jump out of this local minimum, and then do torsion space minimization and find the nearest local minimum. And so sort of by running these Monte Carlo trajectories for a really long time, and running hundreds or thousands of these trajectories, depending on the size of your conformation space, then you'd be pretty confident that your lowest energy state of the protein has been sampled. Okay, so in addition, sort of Rosetta has this, and I'm mainly talking about this protocol since my work makes use of this pretty heavily. Rosetta also has a protocol for doing local backbone profiling. So that is, you have some local region of the protein that you want to aggressively remodel, but you want to keep the rest of the protein fixed. And I've illustrated that sort of at the bottom here. So we have this region in red. And we have this region in red that we want to aggressively remodel. But we want to keep this strand there. And so the basic way that this works is, again, you can make use of fragment insertions here. What you can do is introduce a chain break into this segment. You can then do fragment insertions in this region in red and propagate the movement of the fragment toward the chain break. And so this, you insert a fragment here, it's going to ratchet open this chain break. However, you can then use some kind of geometric loop closure, like cyclic movement descent, to close this loop. And so what this gives us is a way of basically sampling different closed conformations of some stretch of residue. So for example, this protein shown here, so we can keep this segment in black fixed and sample different conformations of this region shown in red. And this is used pretty heavily in comparative modeling in Rosetta. So finally, I guess the last part of Rosetta is that Rosetta's had some success recently when incorporating experimental constraints to guide sampling. So the search problem in Rosetta is very, very difficult for even sort of modest-sized proteins. The conformational space is just too large to explore. However, by just incorporating weak experimental information like partially labeled NMR data or low-resolution electron density data, then this can help guide sampling very much. So the electron density, which I'm going to be talking about today, I'm not going to go into the detail about this, but basically it just computes per residue real space correlations of between a model in Rosetta and experimental density data. And so I've shown an example of this. So starting with this model, we're all moving to this video to restart here. Yeah, so starting with this model in green, by constraining things to the experimental density data, we significantly reduce the switch space. And so we're quickly finding a model that agrees with both the density data and with Rosetta's energy function. All right, so I guess I'll next talk about how Rosetta refinement can be used to improve these weak molecular replacement solutions. I don't really need to introduce this problem too much of the time showing sort of it's the same problem that Thomas was discussing. So the basic idea is that molecular replacements has trouble when the template structure is too far from the target structure. And when molecular replacement fails, there's really two places that molecular replacement can fail. First is in placement of the actual molecular replacement search problem, placing a template into the unit cell. And previous work from our lab, like Ben Quinn and several others, has shown that Rosetta refinement can help sometimes in these cases, that just remodeling structures in the absence of experimental data can help solve molecular replacement problems in cases where the template doesn't work. But also, the second problem where molecular replacement can fail is that you can solve the search problem and correctly place the template in the unit cell, but the initial density method you get is just too poor quality for automatic chain tracing methods to interpret. And I'm going to show that Rosetta can also help in this stage, and also that this stage does arise fairly often in failed molecular replacement cases. All right, so the really high-level view of what we're doing here. So, for molecular replacement search, there's sort of a number of different ambiguous solutions. And so the correct solution is among here, but from the score alone, we can't determine which of these is correct. And from the corresponding density maps, you can't really tell which of these is correct either. And so the idea is that we're going to do Rosetta refinement. So use each of these putative solutions to phase the data in computed density map, and then refine each of these solutions in the corresponding density map. And by doing so, sort of only the correctly placed molecule will the density data agree with the Rosetta energy function. And so you'll see that after Rosetta refinement, it's able to pull out correctly the molecular replacement solution that's correct from among these included candidates. And it's also able to improve the model in such a way that auto-building, this automatic chain tracing, can then succeed. And so then the protocol is shown here. So we begin with standard homology modeling observed. So we use HHPRED to, given the sequence that we're searching for, we use HHPRED to identify homologs. We then perform threading on these sequence alignments and trim non-matching side chains back to the gamma carbon. This is the same thing that Sculptor and Phoenix does. And so basically, depending on sort of the sequence that you're looking for, this gives us anywhere from 1 to 20 template structures or different threadings of the same template structure. We then take each of these structures through a phaser molecular replacement search, and we also do, this is a really permissive search, and that we do very low location function and translation function cutoff, and also permissive with the packing criteria. And we get up to 5 solutions from each of these template structures. So at this point, we have anywhere from 5 to 100 putative molecular replacement solutions. So at this point, we then can use Rosetta. And so we take each of these putative molecular replacement solutions, we use them to phase the data, compute density maps, and we do rebuilding and refinement in density. So with Rosetta, we're not just refining things, we're actually rebuilding. There's gaps in the alignment, and so we rebuild those doing that. The local rebuilding procedure that I showed in the first section. And then we do this energy and density guided structure optimization. So we do repacking and minimization in torsion space against the density data. At this point, again, it depends a lot on the number of models that go in, but we have anywhere from 2,000 to 20,000% of decoys. We then, using phaser, to rescore these models against the crystal data. And generally, if the correct molecular replacement solution is among our input structures, then it's really clearly identifiable at this point. And in the best case, we then take these models into automatic chain tracing, and we're done. In cases where this fails, then we can increase the model diversity. And so what we can do then is do modeling in Rosetta in the absence of experimental data, and set those models to the page. I hope that those perturbations are able to solve this. All right, so I'm going to show just an illustration quickly here of the types of improvements that we can see in these models. So on the far left is the initial molecular replacement pair. Red is the template. Yellow is the ultimate crystalline solution. And the density that's shown here is the density map, the 2-echo FC map, resulting from phasing using this molecular replacement model. You can see there's, kind of zoomed in here, but you can see that there's really discontinuous regions in here. It's really impossible to interpret these. In fact, auto-building fails with these cases. However, Rosetta refinement can sort of improve things. And I think a big part of what Rosetta is doing is that even though the density doesn't really give much signal here, the fact that the density is not well resolved in these regions lets Rosetta know that it can, it's free to move these sectors, whereas the really well resolved density, Rosetta knows to keep the model in place in these regions. And so by doing this, it can improve these models enough that it improves the density to a point that auto-building can succeed. You can see that in all three of these cases, auto-building is able to get something very, very close to the crystal output solution. So we'll just talk about some benchmarking that we did on this. So we used two different, to finish the benchmark this, we used two different templates that have a wide variety. These were already solved structures and have a wide variety of homologs with their structure now. This includes 1A2B and 1X2Q. There's a total of 59 templates for these two models, and we compared, and these cover a wide range of RMS and sequence identity space. And so we compared Rosetta to several different refinement methods. The simulated annealing Phoenix and CNS, and also the Denver strains that Axis spoke about. And so what I'm showing here, and fortunately Tom already has described this density correlation, but basically it's a way of measuring sort of the suitability of a structure for molecular replacement. It's much better than RMS. And so on the x-axis, we're plotting, we're plotting these 20 structures by the density correlation of the template. And then on the y-axis, we're showing after refinement the density correlation. And so for each of these four methods. And so what you see is Rosetta's strength really is in this 0.2 to 0.3 density correlation range. And this corresponds to structures roughly 20 to 25% sequence identity. So this is where Rosetta is performing reasonably well. And so again, then if you take these through auto-building, you can see that Rosetta is able to lead the solution of 9 of these structures. The next best method, Dan, is only able to get 6. And here I'm listing the arm for each of these different methods. The top 11 templates are just sorted by the template density correlation. And then graphically, I'm showing you like this. So here's basically what the maps look like when you phase the data using different model map, using templates with different model map correlation. And so the best model map correlation using density is rapid clear. But sort of as the model map correlation gets worse, you can see there's more and more discount days, less and less side chains are visible. And you see that Rosetta is just sort of extending the quality of initial models that can be used to solve the replacement problem. And you can see the same thing again for 1A2B. Again, there's still any cases here. There's probably, again, the density correlations, starting density correlation is about 0.3 to about 0.36. You can see an improvement with Rosetta. And what happens, again, this corresponds to like 20 to 25% sequence identity. All right, so then we also solved a number of blind cases. So we contacted a bunch of crystallographers and structural genomic centers for unsolved data sets that are potentially suitable. And so we specifically asked for structures around 20 to 30% sequence identity. That it has to be sort of a mostly complete coverage. So 70% of the structure has to be covered in the alignment. At most 4 copies in the asymmetric unit, and no worse than 3 times the resolution. Although there were a couple cases that were worse, a little bit worse than that. And we tested this on a total of 18 different structures, and 13 of them, Rosetta was able to get. So after we'd solved these structures with Rosetta, we went back and using the templates and the sequence alignments that Rosetta used, we tried a bunch of different methods on these structures and saw if we could solve them with these other methods. And it turned out for 5 of these cases, this is Group A shown here. For 5 of these cases, indeed, sort of multiple methods were able to solve this. And so one of them was just standalone, the other one was sort of multiple methods. We're able to solve these structures. I'm listing just the R3s here. And I consider it solved if the R3 is under 0.4. But in the second set, so the remaining 8 structures, only Rosetta was able to solve them. And so in 6 of these cases, this was because the molecular replacement search did succeed with the template alone. However, only Rosetta was able to refine it good enough that we were able to get an R3 to 0.4. And then in the remaining 2 cases, actually the phaser search didn't return the correct orientation of the molecule. And what we had to end up doing was doing refinement in Rosetta without density constraints before solving this molecular replacement problem. All right, so then, so I guess as mentioned earlier, the sequence identity is really noisy, but it's kind of good to get a sense of sort of what sequence identity regime you're working in. And so basically like binning these things in a really wide sequence identity bins, you can start to get a sense of how these things, sort of what sequence identity regime we're working in. And so what we did is took all 72 structures, both blind and benchmark cases, bin them by sequence identity, and plotted sort of the percentage of structures that were solved automatically to an R3 of less than 0.4. And so I guess what you can see is that Rosetta really their strength, again, is 15 to 30% sequence identity, where it's solving about half of the structures that we tested it on. Okay, and so then, this is data actually, this is how I'm familiar with this, and I think it's a really nice experiment. So one of the questions is, so Rosetta is doing massive sampling, and this is generally something that's not done for molecular replacement. So how much of a role is this massive sampling playing? And so what Tom did is basically generated 1,000 decoys with both Rosetta and simulated annealing, and this was in Phoenix. And Phoenix simulated annealing was done at 2 different temperatures. The first is sort of the standard default temperature, and the second is the temperature that mimics the model diversity seen. So it's much higher than normal, so that you can see the model diversity of simulated annealing equal the model diversity coming out of Rosetta. And I think what this experiment shows is it's not just a matter of massive sampling. So the x-axis here, again, is the map correlation between the density correlation between each of the models and the positive structure. And what you can see is that Rosetta is sampling sort of the majority of structures at 0.3 or better, while simulated annealing is relatively few structures in this range. All right, so then I'm just going to show a couple of these, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. But here's one of the blind cases. There was, again, this was 2 domains. One of the domains was easily placed, I think with TMC score of 7.5 or so. But however, there was a C-terminal domain that they could, that the crystallographer design in place. There was a 15% sequence identity template for this domain. And so what we were able to do, the way we were able to solve this in Rosetta, by refining this N-terminal domain in Rosetta with density, we were then able to get a very weak hit with a C-terminal domain. We could then refine that C-terminal domain and rebuild the linker in between the two. And this led to a solution that was good enough for auto building. In fact, our effort is very, very good for auto building. This is pretty high resolution data. Next takes a slightly lower resolution. This was, again, 16% sequence identity template. And again, so you can see the initial model, there's a lot of gaps in the alignment. I guess it's hard to cover, but there's a lot of, so this is the initial liquid placement and the parse length density. This is the final solution. You can see there's a lot more backbone here. There's just gaps in the alignment in this that were unable to be rebuilt by auto build. However, by rebuilding these gaps in Rosetta and refining the models, you get something that's good enough that then this automatic chain tracing does a really good job. Again, automatic very, very well. Here's one of the third cases, fairly low resolution case. There's a very low sequence identity template, 18%. It's an NMR structure, and again, 3 inches resolution. So you can see the starting model here is very, very, it's really bad. Density is really unclear, but Rosetta is able to at least improve this enough that we can get an NMR of 0.28, which was good enough for the crystallographer to take to completion. And then sort of, this is not in the table, this is a much more recent case. Again, this was a two-domain protein. It was a clear hit for one of the domains with, I think, an 8.5 basic Z-score, but they were just unable to place this second domain. Auto build was unable to sort of extend this chain trace at all. The crystallographer wasn't able to manually extend this chain trace as well. However, by doing the same idea that we did before, refining this C-terminal domain in Rosetta, then we could find a weak hit for the N-terminal domain, which we then could rebuild, which then refine and rebuild the linker in between these two domains. This led to, again, after auto building, something which has a pretty good RMR free. This was good enough for the crystallographer to solve as well. So this leads into the final part of my talk, which is using Rosetta for low resolution crystallographic refinement. And this is, I should say, this work that's in progress still, and so I have some preliminary results. I think this would be more interesting to the audience here. This is actually deals with an issue that came up during the molecular placement. So what happened is that one of these blind cases, that the 3-IgG case with the NMR template that I just showed, auto building failed. Even with a pretty good model, auto building just couldn't, the resolution was too low to deal with. And so what happens is auto building returns these basically models with a bunch of chains. It couldn't assign any of the side chains, and the models have high RMR. Ultimately, we were able to solve this using cycles of reciprocal space refinement in Phoenix, followed by Rosetta refinement in density, which I've shown here. And then here's sort of progression. So what happens is sort of that, that Phoenix refinement is sort of able to take it to some local minimum, and then Rosetta refinement is able to sort of get it out of this local minimum, perturb the structure, and then Phoenix refinement can take it to a new lower local minimum. And so this works out really nicely in this case, again, getting a solution. And so, talking with Nat Eccles, he suggested that I try this on a different case. He suggested this 3 NKU, which is really low resolution data. And just to see if this is really a good low resolution refinement strategy. And so we granted this problems when we did this here. So you can see you don't see the same trend. And in fact, the model sort of after the first Rosetta refinement blows up and it never recovers. And really the problem is that the models that come out of Phoenix after that first round have a really poor energy by Rosetta, and Rosetta doesn't correctly deal with them. Instead, these models blow up, and it can't recover from this. So then this encouraged us to try to use Rosetta for reciprocal space refinement, to actually incorporate the crystallographic target function into Rosetta. And specifically what we're doing is basically instead of the normal Phoenix refined target function, we're using a target function that's the Rosetta energy plus the weighted sum of the Rosetta energy plus this agreement to the crystallographic data energy, the maximum likelihood target function. And so by doing this in Rosetta, this kind of offers a number of advantages too that are nice. So the main advantage obviously is that Rosetta's force field hopefully can infer these. So given low resolution data, we can use Rosetta's force field to infer the high resolution NECATs And also, like a secondary advantage of this is that Rosetta has tons of different ways of exploring conformational space. And now if we can put this target function in Rosetta, we can use all these different conformational sampling methods during refinement. So I said about implementing this into Rosetta. And so this was done, again, with a ton of help from Matt Eccles in Paul Adams' group. And so basically, we said about building sort of something in Rosetta that mimics the Phoenix refines macro cycle. So we do basically like solid flattening, B-factor refinement. Then we do actually some real space, so we can use the density model and do side chain repacking minimization and optional torsion space, all atom minimization into density, and then followed by torsion space minimization directly against the crystal data. So yeah, actually implementing this in Rosetta was a bit of a challenge. And so what we ended up doing was basically each of these subroutines here, each of these steps in our protocol calls a Phoenix subroutine through this Python interface. And so this is actually ended up working out really, really nice. That we can do all of these things, just calling Phoenix functions to do de-factor refinement, or to compute the derivatives with respect to each atom's position without having to do it in disk. So it's very, very efficient to do this. Then, in terms of implementing this in Rosetta, there's a new score function for this. So it's just like the density data that we're using, except we're using agreement to the reciprocal space data to guide sampling. Also, we can use, I can't really go into this too much, but so basically Rosetta's symmetry modeling lets us model these structures in the context of the crystallographic symmetry case. And this can be done in such a way that it's very efficient. It's really, the energy calculation takes only a little bit more time than the energy calculation program. And also this is done in Rosetta scripts. This is like an XML interface to Rosetta that's fairly newly developed. And basically it gives you more flexibility in specific protocols. This allows you to switch between symmetric and asymmetric. You can kind of add in different types of moves. So basically each of these, well, I'll show that in the next slide, I guess. But you can do things with real space refinement that you can do other types of moves, background moves, fragment insertions, and mix these things. So this is the kind of example of what things look like. So basically you declare a set of movers in Rosetta scripts. So these movers are each sort of functions that do something to your model. And then your protocol is just sort of a collection of these movers. And so basically the way this is encoded is that each step in this protocol is just a mover, and then we just have a loop over mover that runs this cycle for some things. But it's easy enough to sort of remove certain steps or add certain steps or change parameters. And this hopefully will be in one of the next couple of releases of Rosetta. Like I said, it does model. So the Rosetta energy is computed not just over the monitor, but the monitor plus the interfaces between crystal contacts. This is really important when it makes tight interfaces between crystallographic partners. And this style is straightforward. So one problem, we ran into a couple issues when we were implementing this. The first of these was that sort of compared to the density data, the Rosetta was really, really sensitive to this weighing scheme between the crystal data and between the maximum likelihood data and the Rosetta energy. And so we ended up adopting a scheme similar to what Phoenix Refine does, where you just sort of normalize the gradients between the two over a short trajectory. We then do, sort of unlike the standard Rosetta, we end up doing very short minimization cycles and frequently update this weight and as well as update the solid model. And we're also doing torsion space refinement, but we actually explicitly represent bond angles and bond lengths and let those move a little bit during refinement. And that's really helpful expansion as well. Alright, so the second problem that we noticed had to do when we went, so we started testing this out. The small structures are working pretty well, but as we got to larger structures, we started having problems. And the problems seem to be related to basically like lever effects. So as you move sort of this torsion, the bigger the structure is, the more of a lever effect that it will have. And so one way we ended up getting around that was to introduce random cuts in moves of the structure. So we just think like this. And what we do is torsion space refinement along each of these segments. And then rigid body, we have 6 degrees of freedom to describe the rigid body orientation of each of these segments and explicitly minimize those as well. So now there's nothing holding these chains together. And so we have to actually introduce this chain break energy that keeps these things close together. And at the very, very end, we do just one cycle of this Cartesian space minimization, and that sort of fixes the geometry around these chain breaks. Okay, and so like I said, this is still preliminary work. There's still methods development going on. I do have some preliminary results on this. And again, these data sets were provided by Dan Eccles. So the first data set, we just took 8 high-resolution targets and truncated the data to 3 and 4 inches. So this is definitely artificial, and it gives you data that's much, much better than data that's natively at 3 and 4 inch resolution. However, it also has kind of the advantage of that we have no, I mean, if we want to infer these high-resolution details, it's really important to see what the actual high-resolution structure is like for comparison. And so then that generated sort of confirmed starting models by just running high-temperature simulator annealing for different numbers of steps, and optionally, in a couple of cases, flip rotamers randomly before SM. And then sort of mapped these runs in Phoenix using a bunch of low-resolution specific options for Phoenix, and I ran these in Rosetta. And so the results are shown here. So basically these scatter plots, each point is one of the 40 refined models. The x-axis shows the R3 with Phoenix, and the y-axis shows the R3 with Rosetta. And you put below this line is one where Rosetta is getting a lower R3 than Phoenix. So 3 and 4 angles, you can see. Rosetta is in general outperforming Phoenix, although there are a couple cases of 4 angles where it seems to be worse. However, if you actually look at the backbone of RMS, two of these, we have these high resolution structures available. You can see that we actually are, that Rosetta is actually consistently outperforming Phoenix in this case. But I think the real strength of this method, though, is that you can see if you look at model validation statistics. So if you look at, if you use Molprobity, which uses sort of Raman conjugate statistics and steers to evaluate sort of the goodness of structures, you can see, so two of the measures again, Raman favored and the clash score. You want this Raman favored to be, of course, as high as possible, and you want this clash score to be as low as possible. And so what you can see is that, again, the scatter plots, the x-axis is Phoenix, the y-axis is Rosetta. You see that Rosetta is consistently getting more Raman conjugate favored, although the improvement is pretty subtle. The clash score is like significantly better in Rosetta. In all these cases, it's under 10, which is very, very low. And so then we, encouraged by that result, we carried on to data that's actually natively at 3 to 4.5 dimensions resolution. And so we're now came up with 14 different targets, and we used, in this case, the starting models, to make this a more natural case, the starting models came from homologous higher resolution structures. And there were 25, some of these had more than one starting model, so there were 25 different starting models. And a lot of these, unlike the previous set, it was just sort of random noise, random perturbations of atoms. There's definitely, you can see a lot of these cases do have small 2 to 4 inch delay motion, which makes refinement difficult. And you can see some of these structures get very large, at least for Rosetta standards, over 1,000, or just under 1,000 residues in the asymmetry. Alright, so again, I'm showing these same R3 plots that I showed before. I'm showing Phoenix refine. Again, this is run by NAT using low resolution specific options, and I'm pretty sure we ran these with 10 microcycles. And then Phoenix refine with simulated again. So what you can see is that Rosetta is slightly better in both cases. In fact, if you look at the average R3, you see about 2% better than Phoenix and about 1% better than Phoenix with SA. But again, I think the big difference that you see is that if you look at these model validation statistics, you can see that the Rosetta models are, in terms of Raman conjugate favored, rotor outliers and Molprobity magical, you can see that these models are significantly better according to those measures. Then I just wanted to show some of these, a couple of these cases really quick. So here's one of these 3P WY. Again, this features, it's maybe a little complicated again. But so the model in blue is the deposit structure. The red is what we're starting with. And the green is after Rosetta refinement. And what you can see is that there's like sort of a pretty large domain motion here. And Rosetta has no problems refining that. It's kind of stuck this right in place. Short helix here that has to move fairly far. That's a good job. So actually Phoenix does a pretty good job of getting that from 0.35. Although we're able to get down to even lower, 0.31. And then here's the density. The initial density is essentially undeterminable. The final refinement, it's very, very clear about the backbone. through this density. And then the other case, it's this 3KK9. It's the same idea. There's basically some domain motion here in this one domain. Phoenix has a lot of trouble actually in this case, not being able to get the one on 3.2. And again, you can see Rosetta is able to, so this helix just snaps right into place. Rosetta, this domain also gets most of this domain motion. It's still a little bit off of the current solution, but again, pretty good on free. And so really, but if you look at the structures now, the remaining error is due to basically backbone rearrangements. And so Rosetta is not really, the protocol that I outlined isn't really capable. It's just doing sidechain backbone minimization, quotient-based minimization. And if you look at some of the differences between these two and those two pieces that I showed, you can see this case in the helix that's just unwound in the template. And again, here you have a loop. It's actually this short helix unwinds a little bit in the template structure. And so what you can see is that this suggests that we need to incorporate some sort of fragment-based rebuilding. And we've already done this for the replacement, and so it's just a matter of incorporating this into these refinement cycles. I think this will really make this will really be useful for sort of automatic refinement of 3 or 4 extras. And also, so while we're developing this method, Crystal Emperor at Washington contacted us and had this case that he had donated to solve. And so we took a shot at using our approach with this. This is 3 extras. Sorry. This is 3 extras data, and they were basically the crystallographic refinements were problematic and got really stuck. We had a reasonable upgrade, but the model had really, really poor geometry. And there was a high-resolution homolog available, but it had pretty high upgrades. There was definitely some restructuring. But so basically by running for a bunch of cycles this high-resolution homolog, we were able to get very high R3, or very good R3 with also very good model geometry. In fact, so what I've shown here is the Molprobity output. And so the way Molprobity works again is measuring these models and how good they are with different, under different metrics. Clash score, looking for rotor outliers, Brahma content outliers, and also sort of bond lengths and bond angle deviations. And you can see sort of that his refined model was sort of Molprobity found it to be 14% RAL, so pretty poor and flag model. The Rosetta model, again, was very, very good. Extremely low clash score and also the Molprobity score was in the negative percentile. All right, so in conclusion, I've shown Rosetta can be really useful in doing crystallographic refinement and phasing. It really, what we showed here is that it's very successful using 20 to 30% sequence identity templates in phasing. Crystallographic refinement yields much better model geometry, and generally we're getting lower free R factors. There is methods development needed, and I think the next big thing to do is to get this fragment-based rebuilding into sampling. And so I want to thank a lot of people. So for the number replacement stuff, Tom Corwilliger, Randy Green, Alex Bodauer, all were like extremely, extremely helpful in methods development and testing. And I thank them very, very much. NACAT has been like extremely, extremely valuable with this low resolution refinement. And also I want to thank some people in David's lab who've done a lot of co-development in Rosetta that I've been able to take advantage of and saved me a lot of time, like James and Ethan, and of course my postdoctoral advisor, David. I want to thank you.
We have time for 2 questions for Frank.
Oh. Yes.
First, I'd like to also say that the inclusion of full force fields such as Rosetta actually is a very useful thing to do, and so it's good to see progress there. But I had two concerns here. One is the use of the clash score in particular. Actually, it's highly sensitive to the energy function you're using. In fact, I can get vastly different clash scores depending on the energy function without much of a change in the actual coordinates. So, for example, by including all hydrogens, you may get very good clash scores. I'm not saying it may be necessarily the case for the what you're looking at, but certainly I've seen cases where there was a dramatic improvement by just changing the energy function or the weighting and or including all halogens anyway. The second comment is more, perhaps more in terms of the comparison to the Daniel refinement.
Yes.
As far as I understand from Miran, it was just a single Daniel refinement that was carried out.
Yeah, this didn't do the grade 6.
That's right. So,
probably not a total.
and actually, I looked at the 3 cases that Tom published on the Phoenix website in the category that was only solved by Rosetta. And by doing the full grid search, I got very close, and plus order building, I got very close to, in terms of our free, the Rosetta solutions. And in fact, one of the cases talked about today, the HP 3342, was one of those cases, and I was able to fully refine that. So it just shows that there's multiple methods, at least the cases I looked at, Dan plus order build, as well as Rosetta plus order build. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, I'm just saying that there's multiple ways of solving the structures. So, and I think the real power is, I think, combining all these approaches, because each of them have their strengths.
Yes, I agree.
Any other questions for Frank? Thank you. So how many people have not used phaser to do marker placement? So glad it is not really integrated, so everybody knows. The man behind phaser.